Amanda, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's been years, and I remember your book Nation pretty well, and I liked the book, and I loved our conversation about it. And how does it feel to be so right? Just so. Do you regret being so right? I mean, do you wish that we weren't in this kind of situation you so aptly described? I mean, you wrote it in the midst of things unfolding and whatnot. But I mean, it does feel, you've got to feel, wow, you pretty much got it. Is it too on the nose?
Yeah, it's weird to have both. I feel like I was kind of weirdly ahead of my time and didn't get enough. 1 second. Ah, how dare you? Ah, sorry.
This is great radio.
I'm so sorry.
I'm just teasing you. It's totally fine.
I'm so sorry. Of course, the cat found the one little piece of no. Of course, he found the one little piece of broken glass I'd overlooked. I can't be having a rush to the vet visit because my cat's eating broken glass.
Look, it is a really tough economy. I saw a young family eating broken glass just the other day. They couldn't afford eggs, so they're just eating broken glass. It's happening all over the country right now. It's really. I mean, who cares about eggs? Who cares about the market? You got to take a little pain now for the. I mean, this is the country we live in right now, right? But yeah, I mean, do you are you like, hey, I got it pretty on the nose, and no need to write a sequel really to that book.
Oh no, yeah. No, I was more right than I had any right to be. I don't like gloating. This makes me feel weirdly uncomfortable. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm some magician. I feel like it should have been obvious, but maybe it's just growing up in sort of Republican country and hearing the sort of rhetoric that Trump and the MAGA movement used. And really, since I wrote that book, I've seen a lot of people in my life just get completely consumed by this politics of grievance, resentment, trolling. And that's really kind of all there is now. Insofar, when I wrote Troll Nation, I think there was still a lot of Republicans who held their nose and voted for Trump, but still had some vague idea of a conservative ideology that they wanted to stand for, small government, low taxes, low regulation. And it's not that those aren't still in the mix, but really what is the primary motivator, and in a lot of ways the sole motivator, especially for the voting base now, is just owning the libs. Owning libs at any cost. And I think that, since I wrote, Troll Nation came out in 2018, 2 years later, the COVID pandemic happened. And I think we saw that mentality kind of come to full flowering, right? Which is, here we are facing a mass death event, serious sickness, the possibility of, if you got COVID, especially if you weren't vaccinated, before the vaccination, if you got COVID, you were risking death, you were risking disablement, you were risking pretty serious stuff. But because the liberals took the disease seriously, Trump voters couldn't. Everything is just owning the libs. And so we're, it's been now 5 years since that, and we're still dealing with the fallout, which is it's kind of blossomed into, now you have to get the measles in order to own the libs. Now you have to buy a Tesla to own the libs.
You've got to get the measles. That's fantastic. That's I'm surprised that should be a T-shirt somewhere at a MAGA rally. I just want to see. You know how they put they'll find the 4 African Americans that are at the rally, and they'll put them all right behind Trump, right? And you have to put one of them in a T-shirt that says, "I got these measles just to own the libs."
Well, it's easy to like get the measles to own the libs when really it's making your kids get the measles to own the libs, because you don't have to have a rash from head to toe. You got vaccinated as a kid. Though if you're older, you can actually get it from a kid. So maybe some folks listening should consider getting revaccinated.
I love vaccinations. I get vaccinated for everything. When I go to the doctor, I'm like, what can I get vaccinated for? I'm so excited because I just got eligible to get the shingles vaccine. They were holding out. I was
Yeah.
too young. And now
Yeah.
I can get it. And it's so exciting to me.
Yeah, I had chicken pox at a relatively old age, so I'm like in serious danger of it, and I worry about shingles constantly.
Well,
But
if
I'm not
with
old
any,
enough yet. We'll get there.
they say it's the worst pain. It's like the worst pain in the world. It's interesting because I was going to save this quotation for a little later to ask you about. But you know what? I'm going to lead in with it because you brought up the own the libs on steroids and how this is all there is in our politics right now. This is an essay I just read. It came out last year by Blake Smith, who's a guy I just kind of discovered, gay Jewish writer, really profound guy. And it's in tablet. It's called "Why the Western Rebellion Against the Jews Produces Bad Art and Bad Politics," and it's a wonderful essay. But in it, he has this great, in like the third paragraph, he has this great assessment of the cultural and political moment and comparing it to, say, the 70s. He says, at its best, in the wild diversity of its polycentric cultural and civic life, the United States once had what Americans recognized as a peculiar genius for political compromise, for turning our identitarian loathings and embittered envies into the sublimations of an explosive and globally seductive culture, while keeping politics boring. Column A, Chinatown, great film. Column B, Gerald Ford. Somehow, the formula be rediscovered? We managed then to keep our aesthetics thrumming with barely channeled obscene energies and our politics plodding grayly and dully along in an uninspiring, tolerable routine. Disastrously, it's now the other way around. I read that. I thought that is incredibly profound. I mean, do you resonate with that? This sort of where the cultural focus, the entertainment, the excess is all not in art; it's in politics.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's overstated that politics was boring in the era of the Vietnam War and the 70s, where terrorist attack, like domestic terrorist attacks, were a common occurrence.
Especially under Nixon. In Nixon's second, that was crazy.
Yeah,
If we had the amount of domestic just bombs going off, we would be on lockdown right now. I mean, people don't realize the sheer number of bombs in mailboxes and stuff.
Yeah, like I mean, Dustin Hoffman, his house almost got bombed by the Weather Underground on accident. He lived next door to a Weather Underground bomb that accidentally blew up.
Yeah, but that was before he made Tootsie.
Yeah, but I mean, so I would say, but it is true that like leaning on Gerald Ford is a little bit of a cheat in the era of what was actually Richard Nixon, right? Politics in the 60s and 70s were not quiet, but I think they were serious. And like what you're facing now with and our politics now are very serious still, but it is true that like it is unlike the 60s and 70s, like as bad as Richard Nixon got, he was never a fascist. And
I called Nixon our last liberal president.
no,
ERA, EPA, rather, affirmative action, wanting to end local funding of schools. If you look at Nixon now, he doesn't look so bad.
Well, and it wasn't just policy. It's like he didn't really object to liberal democracy as like a concept, whereas obviously Trump does, Elon Musk does. Elon Musk is completely sucked into this like truly fascist ideology that like democracy just doesn't work, that only dictators can get anything done. But like
when people think that's an exaggeration, right? You just need to Google Curtis Yarvin and who he quote. I mean, who someone like Vance quotes, right? And Elon Musk in the tech bros. This is, you're not being hyperbolic when you're saying he thinks democracy's over. That's really explicit.
Yeah. No, him and Peter Thiel, they're on the record discussing democracy is like a failed um like experiment, right? And the entire war on the federal government is based in this idea that democracy created an inefficient government system and that it needs to be destroyed from the inside because the people can never be trusted to make the correct decision, that we're going to just keep plodding along with our social security checks and our Medicare, and we're getting in the way of a truly great society. Which unfortunately, when you actually kind of like dig into like these tech billionaires like worldview, that you realize that their idea of a great prosperous society is 95% of people working for like, or not working, like working for like menial wages so that like a handful of very rich people can be even richer, which is a wild thing. Like Elon Musk doesn't think he has enough money, is what that kind of comes down to. So he needs your grandma's social security check. And that this is not an exaggeration. I mean,
You
I
have a
think,
great quote in a piece you wrote about the tech bros and the whole Prospera, these cities they want with sort of no rules. And I just watched this show Paradise on Hulu, which is that, right? It's a sort of dystopian tech city that billionaires make for the end of the world's apocalyptic scenario. And you have this great sentence. You say you're quoting Musk from Twitter, where he says Stalin, Mao, and Hitler didn't murder millions of people. Their public sector employees did. And you say, implying that everyday people were working on their own against the will of their dictators, right? I mean, this is like, you can't make this up. You couldn't have Mike Myers say that in a Saturday Night Live sketch.
no, yeah. And I think that's actually kind of one of the reasons when you're saying just look it up, like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk will say these radical things on Twitter. They will say them in speeches. They will say them constantly, constantly, constantly. And they get away with it because what they're saying is so completely bonkerballs that like that people just simply don't believe it. Like I'm a journalist, I'll write and I'll say, well, they said these terrible things. Peter Thiel has repeatedly said that democracy is failed and supports, he's actually put money behind this Freedom Cities project, and that's an Orwellian doublespeak phrase. It's an anti-freedom city. The idea behind it is it's a company town where the federal and state laws protecting workers' rights and human rights don't apply anymore, and that the billionaire who owns the city dictates everything that goes on. He is the law of the land, and that if you live there, you're just basically a serf. When you say it, like these are facts, they believe in these things, they've put money behind these things. But if you tell people, a lot of the time they're like, that can't be true. And I think in part because there's an idea in our society still, even with Donald Trump, but like winning an election and everything, that people with nutty ideas are like only just like underemployed cranks on the internet and not rich and powerful people, that somehow there's a system to sort of filter out the cranks from getting rich and powerful in our society. And that's just simply not true.
You have this great a couple sentences here you write about Musk and the tech bros and their views on democracy. You say actual dictatorships are messy and chaotic, not the smooth, efficient stories of the techno-fascist imagination. And of course, there is no moral justification for the untold amount of human suffering they cause. So instead, I love this. So instead of dealing with the cognitive dissonance, Musk is burrowing himself in the fantasy that the problem with Nazi Germany, Maoist China, and Stalinist Russia is not too little democracy, but too much of it. I mean, that's remarkable. I mean, right? That this is really that it seems like the problem in these authoritarian regimes is they really just got away from the dictators, right?
I can't think of another way to interpret it. Was the public servants who did the Holocaust and not Hitler, right? I mean,
I mean, this is why you got to go through Doge and you get rid of these people, right? At the EPA and stuff. They're the bad people, right?
Yeah, if you let the people at the EPA keep working, they're going to definitely Holocaust somebody. That's definitely happening. Yeah, no, I mean,
I thought
it,
that the last couple people I've
the,
met that work for the EPA, I thought fascists right away. In fact, one of them I thought I saw him, at line dancing. I swear he was goose stepping. I swear.
well, it's funny because it's like, well, it's not funny, but it's like, I, I want to underscore that when Musk retweeted that, he was diving into, and it mentioned Stalin and Mao as well, but there is a lot of different flavors of Holocaust denial, and one of them is that Hitler wasn't aware and Hitler didn't know. This is false. Hitler ordered the Holocaust. He definitely ordered the Holocaust, but there is a strain of Holocaust denial where they're like admit that it happened, but they'll kind of try to like separate it from the ideology of the Nazis. And like a lot of Holocaust denial, there's not like a real good attempt to like fill in the blanks. Like, okay, if you're allowing that like the top brass of the Nazi party somehow didn't know about the Holocaust happening, how did they not notice it happening on their watch? Who did it then? All the like they don't answer those questions. They just want to kind of throw up enough dust and stuff to confuse people about, again, the dangers of fascism. The whole point is to make people feel like fascism is not as bad and scary as those hated liberals say it is.
I mean, couldn't you just say, hear Elon Musk say, I mean, you just have to understand that Mein Kampf is just a misunderstood rags to riches story.
I mean, give him time.
Yeah, I'm sure it will definitely happen. You have this great piece where you talk about love bombing and how this is all in Salon, and I'll put some links in the show notes for our readers because they should go read all these pieces. Where you talk about how Musk really he comes on really strong, love bomb, spends all this money on the people like Amber Heard, all these women he's dated, and then becomes abusive, and you see this pattern with Donald Trump, right? That he's starting the love bombing stuff. He's really the alpha in the relationship in some ways, and eventually, maybe you think he'll turn on Trump like he did on his other lovers.
Well, yeah. So basically, the
I mean,
article.
we should qualify that in fairness to Musk. Say he's only publicly said that he loves the president as much as a straight man can love another man, whatever that means.
Yeah, who knows what's going on? Yeah, I obviously they're not having sex with each other, but I don't know that Donald Trump has been there
Hey,
for.
what happens at Mar-a-Lago stays at Mar-a-Lago. Okay.
But I do think that, so it is interesting that Elon Musk has had a lot of, he's had, I think, one wife, but like a bazillion girlfriends, and the pattern is very clear. And he uses money as he like with them as he does with everything else. He just showers women with like really expensive gifts, like and he can spend as much money as he wants to buy somebody off. But it's called love bombing. It's like making somebody feel really special, and it's a classic abuser tactic, right? Which is like you just really rope somebody in by like overwhelming them with gifts and love and making them feel like they're the most special person in the world. And then once they have become attached to you, then you start controlling them, withdrawing from them, degrading them, and with the worst of it, like physically abusing them. I know that with Musk, he's definitely like degraded, emotionally abused women. He does it in public, so we don't have to like speculate here. He's emotionally abused a lot of his partners in public, and I think that he has gotten so used to just doing this to one woman after another that it was a a breeze to do it to Donald Trump, who is a narcissist. And I think, unlike most women who you really have to like overwhelm with, like, I've bought you 10 Teslas, right? That shows I love you, right? With Donald Trump, all he needs to do is just flatter him constantly. And Trump, who's addicted, is a narcissist, is like addicted to that very easily. And so, I think what abusers do to their victims is they control them. That's their main goal, is like bringing somebody under their control. And I really want to emphasize, I don't think Donald Trump is a victim, but I think that it's important to understand that Elon Musk is using the tactics that abusers use against women to suck Donald Trump in and then control him. And it's very clear that that's what he's doing. He spent, what, $250 million on the campaign, some ridiculous amount of money, probably more than that, honestly. He's given Trump another 100 million to keep him roped in. He won't leave Trump's side. He moved into Mar-a-Lago, which is another tactic that abusive men use against women.
Yeah, and that leaked out, right? I mean, that was multiply sourced, that people just didn't know when he was going to leave. He kind of uninvited, just kind of camped out.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's like a very classic abuse tactic, is moving really fast, right? Like getting, you've only been dating a month, you got to move in with me, it's true love, right? He just sort of modified it to manipulate Donald Trump. Again, Donald Trump is not a victim. He's a terrible person. If he wasn't the leader of the free world, I would kind of enjoy watching him just get completely dominated by like Elon Musk, because they deserve each other. But we're in this situation now where Donald Trump is kind of a weak old man. He's like an evil weak old man, but he became a target for another man who is seeking a way to be the president without having to do the dirty work of getting elected. And so, it's very obvious to me that he's controlling Donald Trump. Like, Trump's I'm not like, Trump is submissive to Musk in the same way that he's submissive to Vladimir Putin. It's kind of remarkable. And Musk is just very good at manipulating him. And it's scary, because I don't think, left to his own devices, Donald Trump would want to, like, say, destroy Social Security. But Musk wants to.
It's interesting. You mentioned Vladimir Putin. I heard Jonah Goldberg recently say something about Trump that I found interesting. He said, to understand Trump, you have to understand how mob bosses work, right? Mob bosses are abusive to the people that are under that they see as underlings, right? That they see as lieutenants, that they see
punch
as
down, kiss up.
punch, right? And but to their rivals, they're strangely respectful, right? I mean, so
Putin's not his rival,
or to a boss that you see as another mob boss that controls another area, right? So Putin and Xi aren't American rivals. They're other mob bosses who have another territory, who are to be respected, right? And if he goes into the Ukraine, I mean, it's like a mob boss, that runs Brooklyn isn't so concerned with what somebody's doing in Chicago or something. There's a respect for that. I mean, do you think is there something to that, to the sort of looking at Putin as, well, he's another mob boss like me?
Yeah, and I would even say he's an aspirational figure for Trump, because Trump, I think, recognizes on some level that, well, I also, like, all of these kinds of, like, people, like Putin is also like a weird, petty, paranoid, weak person fundamentally at heart. Like, that's why he has to build up all this power around him, because he personally is a sad, pathetic man. They all are these.
But don't you have? I mean, come on.
But
the shirtless on the horse, though. There's a little charisma.
Yeah, there's no overcompensation there, not at all. But like,
I wish I looked like that, shirtless on a horse. I mean, there's just something masculine about that.
People who are people who are confident about how they look don't take their shirt off to go horseback riding.
You're
It's
teaching me
weird.
so much about the human condition right
It's
now. Yeah.
weird behavior.
That's where I went wrong. It was
More
in college. It
important.
was the first time I took my shirt off horseback riding that really life went. That's where things went downhill for me.
I mean, I think the more important thing is that Donald Trump perceives cruelty and bullying as the same thing as power. And so, because Putin is willing to just kill all millions of his own people, millions of Ukrainians if need be, in order to get like his way, Trump like thinks that's awesome and he envies it. I honestly I do think a lot of this aggression towards Canada of all places is him kind of envying Putin and like fantasizing and maybe planning to do something similar himself.
Yeah, I think it doesn't a lot of the right seem to look at Putin. Not a lot might be an overstatement, but a sizable chunk, at least in my anecdotal experience here. There's almost like I think this admiration of the Christian ethno state, right? That hey, look, he's a guy that he's against DEI, he's against the gays, he's against like he's got a Russia for Russians, right? He's making Russia great again. He's expanding. There is this sneaking. Well, I say sneaking. It's not really that sneaking admiration, right? This is that is kind of strange, right? And that the party of Ronald Reagan has this now has this affinity for
agent, yeah. Which Putin was before he was a politician. He was in the KGB.
right. I remember when John McCain said when he first met with him, Bush said, "Man, I looked in his eyes and I saw his soul." And McCain said, "I look in his eyes and I see three letters: K, G, and B."
Yeah.
But that is, I do wonder, is there something about you've written recently about Paula White, right, and prosperity gospel stuff, and how and you make some great connections between Trump and the prosperity preachers. How they say, give, and you never quite get back, right? I mean, what is it, when when the tides go out, the blessings rain down, or whatever, right? But I wonder, is there an anxiety about us? I mean, we're an increasingly pluralist society. We don't have, I think, or I think the civil religion is eroding, right? I mean, you had something, for instance, in the '60s where Martin Luther King could get up. 1960s, highest point of church attendance in the country. Martin Luther King could get up. He didn't need to talk about Jesus. He didn't need to talk about Christianity. He could go up as a Christian clergyman, talk a little bit from the Hebrew Bible, quote Enlightenment thinkers, founding fathers, Abraham Lincoln, and people. There was a sacred canopy there, right, that people could get under to some degree, and you're able to sort of move the needle a little bit. I mean, I don't know. Is some of the Christian America stuff rooted in anxiety about not having a kind of spiritual center, not having a kind of a fear that, hey, we're going to be rudderless or something? Trying to understand it.
No, I don't think so. I think that when you see, I think that Christian nationalism is on the rise, not because people are unchurched. And in fact, I think that you're seeing a rising number, like a rising number of people who are not identifying as Christian or spiritual, but not religious. And they're fine. Like politically, most of them are pretty liberal on average, especially atheists. I think what you're getting with conservatives is a fear that whiteness, like it's much more about race and about white identity. And that's and they're using religious rhetoric to justify what is otherwise just blatant racism. And you can see this when you're looking at a lot of the like grow, like the more MAGA Christian nationalist charismatic preachers that are growing in popularity, they disparage civil rights activists, they disparage MLK. They often will act as if like Black preachers don't even count as Christians. And because in their mind they don't, like, because Christian is just a code word for white. And they're kind of inseparable. It's like Christianity is less a faith practice in a lot of ways and much more a way of creating an ethnic American identity around whiteness.
I mean, last week I had a guest on the show, Amanda Tyler, great book, How to End Christian Nationalism. And she talks about how largely, when you look into PRRI and Pew and stuff like this, that 20% of the country is pretty hardcore Christian nationalists, right? Hey, like let's go, let's retake the country for Jesus, for the you can actually get this.
Not even
thing.
Retake, just take.
Just take it, right? Just take it, right?
They say
just
retake,
take it.
but they
right.
created a fake history to justify this.
There is this thing I want to get. I'm going to get it at some point. I'm sure you can get it on eBay or whatever. I've seen it. It's in our city here. It's set in a picture in our city of Philadelphia, Independence Hall, and the founding fathers are gathered around, and in the middle is Jesus, which I think is really how some people see the history, right? So you have 20% that are take the country for Jesus, 20% that are resistor, that are hey, Christian nationalism is a bad idea, we got to combat it, and really the 60% are sort of not striding either way. And when you look at it, it's a remarkable amount of people that say the country was found to be a Christian nation, should be a Christian nation. Then when you look at like the Pew data, when you ask them what that means, right? Mm-hmm. They start to say, well, I don't mean the Bible should be the source of laws. Oh, I don't mean there shouldn't be religious pluralism, right? I mean, so
it's that does, identity.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. And people, it's they don't even necessarily want the 10 Commandments in schools, but they do want some semblance that, hey, it's a sort of milquetoasty middle position, right? I mean, that African Americans, it's like it's over half of African Americans or something that when you ask them, should America be a Christian nation? Yes. I mean, it's so. I mean,
that's
so
like
this stuff.
People think Christian equals good. They were raised like they're thinking Christmas and Easter and praying and obeying the golden rule and these.
By the way, I love the little voice you do when you're first personing these people. It's kind of a sing-songy. I love it.
I'm not trying to be mean, but like it's because the people aren't thinking about it very deeply. So it's like the word Christian is just sort of got this like generically good vibe for most people because they think it's good to be religious, even if in reality they're not all that religious. And it just sounds good and it sounds right. So asking, should we be a Christian nation is like, to a lot of people, they hear that as like, should Christmas continue to be a holiday? Should people be able to pray to Jesus or praise Jesus or say, God bless you when you sneeze? It's functionally the same thing as saying, should America be a good country where people are nice and like Jesus? And like, that's not what Christian nationalists mean by it. Yeah. And that's not, and that I think is and it is a branding problem. Like I've spoke to some folks that have been trying to do some organizing against Christian nationalism, and they find this is a real issue, which is when they call it Christian nationalism, most people are like, well, what's so wrong with that? Christian?
Yeah, exactly. And
it's like, well, yeah, not these Christians. And this isn't like, you're just like corner church. And this is not like a vague sense of Christianity. This isn't like, oh, I'm a Baptist and you're Methodist, but we're all Christians. This is something much more theocratic. And this is something that's very tied into racist identity politics. But it's tough to get that across to people. But I would point out that that's why, like the fascist right has embraced Christianity as their main identity, not whiteness or labeling themselves fascist or whatever. It's because they're basically trying to use Christian as a cheat code.
It's interesting. You've written about Doug Wilson, right? Who is a pretty. I'm actually trying to get him to come on the podcast. It's funny, and I've read a book by Doug Wilson years ago. It was the best book on infant baptism I ever read. It was remarkably. I mean, and he is out there, but this was years ago. I really didn't know about him, and I read this book he wrote on baptism. But Doug Wilson, so he is a guy that he would say I'm a Christian nationalist. And a matter of fact, I've heard him in an interview with Tucker Carlson. No, I mean those two guys. They know how to party.
Doug Wilson openly identifies as a Christian nationalist.
He would say that's better than what most people call me, which is racist or slavery defender or whatever. Which he has defended slavery, Doug Wilson, which is very interesting. But I mean, he is a guy that really. But he's not. It's not. I mean, despite the fact that I think he says some pretty objectionable things, it's not code for him. Like, I know people that go to his church. He really believes this stuff. He's really. It's not a bait and switch for him, right? So, I mean, how do you distinguish between the people that actually? You're right. I think there are fascists. They're absolutely using Christianity as an instrumental tool. But then again, there are people like Doug Wilson who really.
Well, I mean, he's also
sincere.
He's a fascist. So basically what we have right now with the MAGA movement, which is definitely fully flourished into a fascist movement, is what you usually have with fascist movements, which is you have a marriage of what I would call traditionalists to corporate interests, right? This is like one of the most basic political science definitions of fascism is when you have those two groups of people, like corporate interests who want to create a like capitalist dictatorship, and traditionalists who want to create a theocratic dictatorship. Like when they realize that they have an alliance against liberals, who are people that want freedom and democracy. That's where fascism sort of flourishes. And this is always like a tension in like a lot of fascist governments. Like there will be a large number of people in these movements who aren't particularly religious themselves. They make common ground because they see religion as a good way to manipulate people. And so they will embrace it as a propaganda weapon. And then you definitely have the people that are involved because they're religious fanatics who believe that they have the right and even duty to force their religious views on everybody else with this, the violence of the state, right? And so you get, I mean, that's like classic theocracy, like Iranian theocracy, Saudi Arabian theocracy, that kind of thing. And like this,
I mean, Doug Wilson has said when he said this on NBC Meet the Press, when he Christianizes Moscow, if he had his way, you couldn't have a gay marriage.
Yeah.
But he said he wouldn't make it criminal to be gay. So what a magnanimous position that Doug Wilson holds.
Yeah, that's where they're going. I mean, and obviously, like we're already seeing like a lot of the theocratic urge of the Republican Party has kind of always been. What's funny about this, and I think one of the reasons it's tough to like put your finger on exactly when this all turned to fascism, is because the Republican Party has always had this kind of marriage of theocrats and then like business interests. It's just, I think that the juice has come with Trump giving them permission to sort of indulge their like belief that they don't have to persuade people, because that was never going to work. And instead they have to force.
Yeah. Isn't the irony here that the people that, I mean, your Reagans and your Bushes, who actually were probably Christian to some degree. I mean, went to church and stuff, but where, they kind of gave a wink and a nod to the Christian theocratic impulse, but never really let them run wild, right? Whereas now you have the Trumps and the Elon Musks who aren't religious people who were like, yeah, go theocracy, theocracy gone wild, let's sell the videos late night on cable television.
Yeah, and I think that's because the fulcrum isn't religion. The fulcrum here is power, right? And like, so the view is not like the problem with and I would say Reagan and Bush again, like happily backed a lot of theocratic laws against gay rights, against abortion rights, things like that. But at the end of the day, like, they fundamentally didn't believe that they should overcome the will of the people. They were able to do those things because they still felt like they had majority support behind these views, or that they could cobble it together, right? That they could build a coalition of people that were willing to go along with that. Whereas Trump doesn't care about like it's not about religion, it's about having power over everybody else. It's about hierarchy. And like that's kind of the difference. And religion is a tool. It's not a belief system for him. It's just a weapon among many to gain power. But it is fundamentally just like everything else, just like the flag and other kinds of, iconography that he uses to sort of create good feelings around what is fundamentally an ugly like view, which is like that he should have this right to rule over everybody else, like with an iron fist.
I'm going to read you something from Ezra Klein, who he was having a conversation with a guest about a month ago, who was Cuban American journalist, and Ezra, in the context of the conversation, says this: I think there are seasons to the way we understand the world. Certainly in the Obama era, we were in a season of empirics and technocracy. And I don't mean that just in terms of the reports people produced and the way they argued. I also mean it in terms of the aesthetic. This is a point my colleague Ross Douthat has made, but it's also something that I've been thinking about. It has felt to me for some time like we're re-entering a slightly more mythic turn of the wheel. I think you see it in the popularity of Catholicism with its pomp and its circumstance and the strangeness of Greek Orthodoxy, the return of astrology as a major force. And something about Trump ended up fitting that for a lot of people, at least. I'm not saying that I have this particular interpretation of him, but the degree to which, even within his own movement, he's almost like the grand Ayatollah of national conservatism. That even the people who like him don't view him as this precise technical policy thinker. They view him as somebody with a kind of intuitive, almost spiritual connection to the country that they see him leading and the people they see him representing. And with the revolving of all these other powerful figures like Musk and so on, it wasn't just his show anymore. He became like this demigod-like or pope-like figure presiding over a movement. And is there something to that even though the church attendance is down, there is sort of still this powerful resurgence of the spiritual, not religious types? And is there something about the mythic quality that people are yearning for that Trump? I mean, gosh, the guy gets shot. He's like wounded for your transgressions. I mean,
Oh no, yeah.
is there something to that? Is Douthat or is Klein onto something there? Do you think it's overstated?
Way overstated. I think that that's putting ennobling language on what is actually something a lot uglier, which is just a wide-scale rejection of rationality, truth, and evidence. I think insofar as the wheel is turning, it's a lot of people like getting hostile toward like adopting a view of facts, rationality is almost kind of like harsh in their vibe. And like, I think sometimes it seems a little innocent insofar, like astrology is a good example. Like a lot of liberals are into astrology and it really is that vibe. It's not that that makes them feel spiritual. I talk to people that are into it all the time. A lot of them aren't really particularly spiritual or even longing for that. It's just that it makes them feel good to like have a space where they don't have to feel so just yoked to facts, that they can just like magical thinking has this appeal to it because it is precisely not rational. Rationality is hard. It causes the brain to hurt, as opposed to like, it's fun to be like, it would be cool if like my sun sign said something fundamental about me. But if you press them, like they rarely ever stick to it. They're like, meh, it's just a game. The problem is that like, and you hear this with a lot of people that lightly indulge conspiracy theories too, which is like, it's fun for them. It's fun. It's like a break from reality. The problem is and I understand our reality has sucked a lot in the past few years. Like COVID was like hardcore reality. Like that was a painful, can't escape it reality, that a trauma that I think we have not fully recovered from as a society. So I get it, but the problem is that like that urge is being harnessed by despicable actors like Trump, who are using it to sort of create a larger emotional permission to just reject reality altogether. Like the truth is whatever you want it to be. Facts don't matter. We can say that millions of people on Social Security are already dead. They're definitely not, but that if that's what we want to believe to take away their checks, so be it. We can all just believe what we want to believe because screw it. And I think that that's what's kind of going on, is I think there's an exhaustion point with science, facts, and reality. And I think that was kind of made worse by COVID.
Yeah, it's interesting though. There's a film my friend David Shields did, How We Got Here, and in it he talks about it's sort of from Nietzsche to Trump, and he makes a point there that and he and I have talked about this pretty extensively, but postmodernism starts, right, as something ethically salutary, right? Hey, it's people saying, look, there's not one truth, right? Truth is not objective. Truth is subjective. That you that somebody that you're situated as a white guy, right? And you see things not with cool, detached rationality, but you see things from your perspective. As a woman sees things perspectively, as an African American, Hispanic, we have feminist ethics and ethics rooted in Latin America, and this sense in which trying to open up the table and make the truth discovering the truth a more democratic process, right? But you did hear people on the left in my tribe say there is no truth, there is no, and then it gets weaponized by the right.
But that was a total misinterpretation of what postmodernists were generally saying, which is what.
I mean, you read Foucault. I don't think that's total misinterpretation of like Foucault. Right?
It's much more like it was a lot more complicated. It gets super dumbed down. He wasn't saying gravity isn't real. He wasn't saying germs weren't real. He was saying that that a lot of what is asserted as truth in our society is actually socially constructed.
Absolutely.
And that we need to understand social construction and what it means, and how like what we consider truths are often just sort of like social agreements, sometimes forced on us against our will, right? And so, or not against our will, but without like pushed on people through systems of power that they haven't really questioned in any depth. That's a very different thing than saying germs aren't real, that bleach injections are better, for that taking vitamin A for measles.
No. And I'm not denying that there's a different force to it. But I remember when Kellyanne Conway said to Chuck Todd one time, he says, "These are facts," and she says, "Well, I have alternative facts," and he says, "No, I mean those aren't alternative facts. Aren't facts. They're falsehoods." At that moment, Kellyanne Conway sounded like the relativist, and Chuck Todd the old school objectivist, right? And I find that flips a lot today, right? Like
relativist was a term basically constructed by conservatives to demonize what was actually not an assertion that unreality, like postmodernists weren't trying to like make this true. They were observing something that was already true, which is that for instance, God is a social construction, race is a social construction, money is a social construction, and they weren't
Right.
saying things don't have power.
Yeah.
They
No.
were
No.
saying that their truth sort of derives from their power, but like if everyone like died, if all humans died tomorrow, these things wouldn't exist, and so they're socially constructed. It's a very different thing than saying up is down and black is white, and you
Right. Right.
know.
No. Yeah. There's something Orwellian to it, but there is a sense in which someone like Steve Bannon, right, who I do think knows some of this stuff, right? I mean, Trump doesn't know anything about postmodern philosophy, but Steve Bannon does, right? I mean, he reads French novels and things like this. I mean, he's not a dumb guy. I mean, there is kind of a weaponization, right, of perspectivalism, right? That this is kind of, and I just think it's interesting. Now you have on the right people arguing for relativism, and on the left you have people like me saying, no, we need to get back to old school objectivity, right? I mean, it's just strange how those things have flipped a little bit.
Yeah, but I just don't see it that way. I don't think the left has given up the idea that we need to continue to question things that are handed to us on a platter as truths when they're not, when they're obviously socially constructed, and it is okay to see how things like, you know, gender or IQ or money is always the one I go to, because people
Sure.
can't deny that if every human being died, there would be no such thing. Money, what's a dollar bill without a person to spend it?
Right,
And
right, right, right.
so that's what that means. But I am unfortunately a slave to another objective reality that is socially constructed, or a non-objective but socially constructed reality, which is time, and I'm out of it. I'm sorry.
Now, this was a
I
great
have a
conversation.
heart out.
This is fantastic. Thanks for spending some time talking to me, and I'd love to have you back on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.